We'll be reading from the Torah, a section that has some familiar Hebrew words for many of us. The words Ma Tovu Ohalecha Adonai. We know them from morning services, from B'nai Mitzvah, from the High Holy Days. We often begin our services with these very words. But you read them, if you get accustomed to reading Torah, you'll come upon these words, and they actually feel like, in some ways, they're not written the way Torah is usually written. They're written more like the later books, the books of writings and prophets. They're poetic, more like what the prophets write by using imagery, and they have a certain pattern to them as you say them, much more like you would find in Psalms or Proverbs. So I want to share first in the English, and I invite you, if you want, to close your eyes even. I want to share it slowly, these words that we'll read tonight, and I want you to imagine what the poet was envisioning when these words were put into our Torah. It starts at the setting is Balaam is overlooking the people camped far away, supposed to curse them, but instead finds that they're deserving of a blessing out of a sense of awe. So here's Balaam. It says, as Balaam looked up and saw Israel encamped, tribe by tribe, the Spirit of God came upon him. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov. How beautiful are your tents, the people of Jacob. Your dwelling places, people Israel. Like palm groves that stretch out, like gardens beside a river, like aloes planted by a god, like cedars beside the water. These are the words that we sing so often, words of a single person being in awe of simply the sight of seeing the Jewish people. In their tents, no less. Not in their mansions, not dancing in circles, but in these simple forms gathered by the side of a river. They look like they are the tallest of trees, like the most beautiful of gardens, palm groves that you can sit under and find shade. So let me take us now to the present, especially to my very personal present. Tomorrow, my family leaves for camp, for tents, for Jewish tents, for 2 weeks. Some of the people in my family for 4 weeks. We're headed to Wisconsin, to URJ Camp Osrui, because Jewish camping is finally back, among the many things that were on pause. Our congregation has more than a dozen kids who have gone or are going to Jewish camp this summer, let alone kids who go to all sorts of camps for all sorts of different reasons. The time where kids go off to a special place to live amongst their own is now mostly okay again. And so this year, my daughter Hannah and Noah will be in cabins for multiple weeks. Ezra, our youngest, will be staying with Carrie in a very nice non-tent-like room, but going to the camp during the day. And I will be biking on average some 70 miles a day around Lake Michigan with Becky Danelski and Gary Byron, who are here tonight, and 20 teenagers sleeping, as the Torah says, in the Jewish people's tents every night for multiple weeks. People have two reactions I've found as I've been telling them in these last few days that I'm going to camp. They say, vacation. Sounds terrific. I tell them, it is fun, and it's not here, but it's not vacation. Other people, different response. Aren't you too old for that? My response, actually, I think the truth is the kids are too young. Camp is about fun, but it is serious business. And right now, I cannot think of a time when we needed to get a dose of what camp offers more than ever. We should all be able to go for 2 weeks to such an idealistic place during such a time where our ideals have been broken. 20 years ago, long before the pandemic, Harvard professor Robert Putnam published the book Bowling Alone. It outlines his theory that social networks have a deep impact on individuals. He declared at that time, more than 20 years ago, that we were losing our social capital. And he did a ton of research, which showed that there was a decrease in church and synagogue attendance, a decrease in voting, a decrease in political interest, a decrease in memberships in associations, a decrease in visiting with friends, and in his words, words that we love, even though they weren't meant positively, he said, people schmooze less. Our social capital was being tossed out. Our bank accounts of relationships depleting. Among the factors he pointed to, the increase in two-career families, the isolating effects of television, which he claimed every hour of watching TV is an hour not socializing with others. When Putnam writes about social capital, he quotes novelist Tom Wolfe's term, calling it the favor bank. It's more than that, though. It's not just that I offer something to you in our discussion and you offer me something back. It's not transactional, like a McDonald's window. It's I'll do this for you, and then if I'm in a community that really has the value of social capital built into them, I don't expect you to do anything for me. I believe in the golden rule and in paying it forward. That's what social capital teaches you. It says, I do something good for you. You don't have to do anything for me. But I believe somebody else, when I'm in need, will do something good for me. My favorite comment from him that explains this idea of believing that people just pass it forward, that they'll just do the right thing at the right time if I do the right thing at the right time. He describes it this way: trustworthiness lubricates social life. Now that was 22 years ago. We think about how we talk about trust today. I think we can think about how stuck our gears would be for a lack of lubrication, because this trustworthiness, this breakdown in our social life, it has left us stuck in so many ways. Our social capital has been divided and depleted, and as a Jewish community, as we look at the rise in anti-Semitism, it's easy to say that our social agreements, the people that we would do life with, who we believed there was trust with, who we could simply live alongside, we have lost some of that trust. We've become more suspect, less certain than we were 20 years ago when Robert Putnam said we were already bowling alone too often. So, any kid who's going to camp this summer, under the age of 18, as they are, this is the world they were born into. Putnam had already written the book. And things, I think we can say, things have not gotten better in that time. Ben Freeman writes specifically about the Jewish community and just wrote a book about Jewish pride in which he relates Jewish pride to the trajectory of the gay pride movement. He writes that too often the Jewish community falls into a dysfunctional relationship with the world as anti-Semitism rises. In his words, Our Jewish journey is not about fighting anti-Semitism as we might think it is during moments of increased anti-Semitism. That is the non-Jewish world's journey. The Jewish journey is one of self-discovery, self-acceptance, self-love in the name of collective pride. We should turn not to others to define our Judaism, but inward, to find our identity, not basing it on the latest image that somebody else came up with, but rather on who we are as a people and the values we hold. This is where Jewish pride begins. 20 years ago, because we were overscheduled, overworked, watching too much TV, Putnam declared that we were losing our social capital, losing the trust that greases the wheels of our relationships. Now we've been through a pandemic. Now we have schools and synagogues defined not by the values they teach, but by how safe we are from what threatens us, by the outside world. So, camp is not a vacation. And camp is not a place that we should regret having to go. We send our kids to camp, especially to Jewish camp, because it's a place where none of what I just described exists, not even a little. There's no overscheduling. There's no TV. There's no threats from the outside world. The social capital at camp is endowed like most Ivy League schools. You talk to people at camp, and their relationships are built on generations of trust from people they don't even know, and within a day, they go from not knowing someone to trusting them for the rest of their life. And Jewish camp knows not of anti-Semitism. At Jewish camp, kids walk around and hear Jewish music coming from everywhere. They feel a sense of being Jewish, doing everything. Every meal, every activity. Basketball is Jewish somehow. It all becomes a part of their Jewish identity. One author put it, perhaps some of us would take a little offense to this, but I'm sure there's some truth to it. He said, too often, the Judaism we serve people, our kids, feels like we're pouring castor oil down their throat. But at camp, the same thing tastes just like candy, and they just want more. And in the process, they learn to love who they are as individuals, as Jews, as budding adults. So, camp is serious work. It's the work we do to replenish the social capital that we've lost. It's a place that's filled with trust. And Jewish camp in particular, it's a place where you become your truest self. So, we should all get to go there. I'm lucky. I get to be there for 2 weeks, biking with sweaty, hormone-infused teenagers whose knees have never hurt and whose backs have never bothered them. I already know that among the 24 of us biking, there are gay and straight and transgender Jews, Jews from America and Israel, rabbis and lay leaders, future rabbis and future lay leaders. I've already been told by Gary and Becky, who've done this trip many times, one of the challenges is you're biking down the road in the Upper Peninsula, and the kids won't stop singing. What a problem to have. It is not vacation. It's professional development. I have no doubt I will learn from the way that they trust each other, rely on each other, and accept each other. And I expect to return very tired, but inspired by a Jewish community built on trust and pride, two areas we have vast deficits in today. There's commentary on why Balaam compares the tents of Israelites to gardens beside a river, to cedar beside water. And the answer is because when you live in tents, close together with people who love you, you can do anything. You grow like the cedar. You water plants like the most beautiful gardens. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, how beautiful our tents can be. I'm excited to head out to these tents of our people this month, and I'm excited to bring back, as I have every time I've seen them, the inspiring image of a perfected Jewish society, one that as adults we look upon our children and don't ask them to follow us, but rather say, how can we replicate what you have created? Shabbat Shalom, and I will see you in 2 weeks.